warm welcome to you viewers. Today we are discussing Wuthering Heights, and another topic in Wuthering Heights that we would be taking up today would be culture and nature. And I will be discussing today the conflict between nature and culture as is viewed in Wuthering Heights. Now, if you would have seen and if you have read the novel, you would know that the natural surroundings play a very important role in Wuthering Heights, in the sense that the characters live in a place that is far from society, it is far from the city life, the urban sphere, and it is situated in the moors, right? So, because it is situated in the moors and it is situated in this kind of wilderness, Wuthering Heights, the place itself and the people who inhabit this place, they are deeply impacted by the natural environment around them. And more often than not, you find that this natural environment in fact has a bearing on their person. Elements of nature actually correlate with the passions of human characters. What we find is that there is on one hand a kind of role of fate, a kind of social convention that is active in society. As against it, there is this human agency which is getting influenced, which is getting its drive from nature. So, human assertion becomes strong because of the natural world around it, because of the fierceness of the natural world, in a way transfers to the human characters in the novel, and this is what makes this novel very interesting, in fact, that you find that because there is human assertion, there is also human agency. At one point in the text, Heathcliff actually tells Catherine that nobody could have stopped our union, not God nor Satan could have, and this is particularly in chapter 15 that I would be focusing on, because in talking about the madness of characters, I am also referring to this kind of ferocious nature that you find in the book every now and then. In fact, nature in its very stark form, in its very ferocious form, is visible from the very beginning of the text, when the narrator is stuck at Wuthering Heights in the very first chapter, and the kind of night that he spends in cold. There is snow outside and blistering sort of a snow, cold, and he is unable to recover from health for the next couple of days. So, what really I am trying to suggest here is that nature has a very important role to play in the lives of characters, and when in chapter 15 you have Heathcliff come to meet Catherine, he says that nothing could have stopped our union, because human agency and human assertion is far superior than social conventions that are ever active in society. And here in Wuthering Heights, you find Emily Bronte taking this stance that human assertion can overpower this kind of conventional normative life that society imposes on individuals. So, role of fate, to what extent is fate responsible in this text, right? Now, Catherine says, well, whatever happened, she married Edgar Linton when she was in love with actually Heathcliff, and why she did that is again a kind of a mystery, and is again open to a kind of a psychological analysis. But what Heathcliff really says is that they were born to be united, and they were meant to be together, but they didn't land up together. Now, is it the role of fate then that has taken the situation in this direction? Heathcliff doesn't believe that. He believes that it was Catherine's choice to marry Edgar Linton. He doesn't believe that it was the role of fate. He often mentions this to Catherine, that it was you who decided this for us, and in fact in the process you have destroyed your life and mine too. So, in a way you find that human beings' choice, human assertion, human agency stands stronger than the agency of fate, convention, or normative life that society imposes. So, role of fate in one way, there may be situational irony in the novel, and yet fate is not the determining factor in the lives of characters. Human assertion is also spontaneous, it is natural, right? Now, when they behave, when Catherine and Heathcliff are young and they are a pair, right, then they are always together, and in this kind of their playfulness, they are always spontaneous, right, as against, for instance, Lintons who go by the societal norms. So, Emily Bronte in one way is also suggesting that spontaneity is something that is that makes our bond with nature stronger. That when characters are spontaneous, then they are most natural. So, in a way, both Catherine and Heathcliff in their young days were natural, spontaneous, and represented nature as against the culture or the cultured lives of the Lintons and the family. And this you would also see in fact the two houses that this novel revolves around. I'll come to this in a bit, but before I reach the point of the houses and how houses become symbols of nature and culture in the novel, I would also like to first talk about this very idea of spontaneity and natural instinct that drives both Heathcliff and Catherine in their young days. In fact, when Catherine tries to do away with her instinct and in fact becomes rational, so to speak, she thinks that perhaps Heathcliff cannot. Once she has hit puberty and once she has become aware of her sexuality, she has also become aware of her needs and her position, and in that position, in that moment, she finds Edgar Linton to be a more suitable husband, where Heathcliff was her companion, playful companion. So, why did she choose Edgar Linton? Did she get floored by the idea of wealth of Edgar Linton? Was she driven by social conventions that what would make a good husband, and therefore she chose Linton? So, these are questions that are the uncomfortable questions in the text, and Catherine doesn't want to admit it. But really speaking, this is the question of wealth and property that Edgar Linton has, and Heathcliff, who's always been uneducated, miserable and poor. So, but Heathcliff was her natural companion. Heathcliff was, in fact, she says in the text that I am Heathcliff and he is me. So, there is also constant reference to the soul and the spiritual oneness that Heathcliff and Catherine share. So, what is this oneness? Now, this kind of organic link, that she refers to, that I am Heathcliff and he is me, or that, he is my soul, and Heathcliff also says that, my half of my part is in Catherine, which is my soul resides with Catherine. So, when there is this kind of organic unity, this kind of oneness felt among characters, it is because there is this oneness which is felt with the environment that they have been a part of. You cannot imagine Heathcliff and Catherine without the moors, without the wilderness, without this vastness of land that they were a part of. So, they are a part of it, and that particular world is a part of them. In fact, towards the end, when Heathcliff dies, the narrator tells us that it is known, people see Heathcliff, the ghosts of Heathcliff and Catherine, in fact, traversing this wilderness, and they are a part of it, and they are in fact one with that wilderness, the natural world of the clouds, of the rocks and the trees. So, they have an organic unity with that world, and which is why they represent what may be called the natural in this novel, as against the cultural, which I will explain in a bit, comes from the Linton family and is situated in Thrushcross Grange also. This also in a way makes the novel a tragic novel, because when social codes overpower the individual, that is when actually tragedy takes shape in the novel. It is when Catherine decides to go by the social convention and choose Edgar over Heathcliff that you find that the change has taken place, that tragic seeds have been sown, because she's not going to be happy with Edgar, and Heathcliff would be also destroyed as a character. So, you see, also very interestingly, in the 19th century, particularly the 19th century novel, you find that the private sphere gets foregrounded over the public sphere, right? That the private self of the individual that is closer to nature, right, becomes foregrounded and is in fact focused upon. So, it is not the courts, the law houses, the public streets for instances, or the church and other areas that are important in the text, rather the personal lives of characters as they are lived in the domestic sphere of their homes. Now, in this, when you notice Catherine's propensities and Catherine's decision to go ahead and marry Edgar, you find that Heathcliff runs away. He's away for a while till he comes back rich and comes back to claim his space in this area, in this place. But we never really know what happened, how that part of the novel is never focused on, as to how Heathcliff really became rich, right? Just as the London life is rarely focused on, just as the beginnings are vague, that Heathcliff was brought in by the senior Earnshaw and from Liverpool, that's all we know. We never get to know what exactly happened, what were his conditions, who were his parents, how did he come to be an orphan, and all those things. So, the public sphere is really out of the domain of this novel. This novel thrives on the private lives of individuals, in their interior, inner complexes and influences, and how they deal with them, right? And here you find that that the private is also suggested through the private enclosures that they are a part of. For instance, human assertion and Catherine's natural instinct is also again reinforced in chapter 15, just before her death, because and she's become frail and is about to die by the time we reach chapter 15 of the novel, because she is not the person that she thought she could be, right? Because she is not the elegant lady who could live her life with all the comforts and riches in the Linton household. She is a free woman. She wants to claim her freedom, her liberty, her playfulness, her capriciousness, which was only fulfilled with Heathcliff in that sense. So her assertion, and it is only later in life when when she's ill that she realizes that she is being enclosed in the sphere of this private chamber of the house and also her body. You see, I said this novel also is spiritual in that sense, right? And now, why did we talk about this spirituality? Because in a way there is this soul or the spirit which is hungry for freedom, which wants to travel, which wants to be away and about and traverse distances, which the body and the private house also disable. So, in that sense, Catherine actually asserts that she is tired of being enclosed in the prison of the house and her body, right? And she wants to escape into the glorious world of nature and of imagination, where she becomes one with trees and clouds and rocks. Now, this assertion of hers that she wants to escape the body, she wants to escape the house, at one level is social, because she wants to escape the social conventions of matrimony that she is now a part of. She is a part of that institution, so she wants to escape marriage. And the other is, and all the ties that come along with it, and the other is more spiritual. And the first part of it is social, when she wants to leave the house and escape the house. The other part of it is spiritual, because she also feels that this body of her binds her to the place. So the individual is also a site of conflict. The individual is also imprisoned in societal norms. Think of, for instance, what Rousseau says, let's go back to nature, right? And he speaks of imprisonment, that social contract that we sign and we become a part of. So in order to escape social influences, norms, it is important for Catherine to physically and also metaphysically, which means also in a supernatural way, leave the body which is in the which is imprisoned, or which is in shackles of the social system. And you know, so there is this, in a way, gives this novel a kind of a metaphysical quality, a kind of a romantic metaphysical quality, which is where you know, the writer is trying to transcend the very physical material world. You know, she is also trying to go away and above, and you know, seek a kind of a mystical union with every other elements of nature. Now this particular streak of the individual desiring a sense of liberation and release from the body is also a very romantic idea in one way. In the sense, what I mean by romantic is that if you are aware of the romantic poetry movement, then you would, and that is exactly around the same time in the 19th century, particularly beginning from 1790s, the romantic poets were around till the 1830s and 40s. So romanticism in literature was, you know, was very important and became very influential, so much so that even, for instance, other women writers, for instance Mary Shelley, when she writes Frankenstein, she is also influenced by this kind of a romantic idea of a supernatural union or of creation of something supernatural. Now here Emily Bronte is clearly supernatural, you know, visualizing a kind of a supernatural union of two human beings who finally leave their bodies behind, of course in death, and their spirits, or you could call them ghosts, you know, are living, have finally found peace together and are living in harmony and joy. So what is this particular idea of you know, leaving the body behind? Now the romantics actually believed in a kind of oneness with nature. They believed that their own world was you know, was quite constraining. Think of the industrialization which had ruled the roost, which was coming in a big way in England. Think of capitalism that was coming through industrialization in England, and you know, the establishment of factories and other places, other things. So of course in this kind of a situation, you have writers who idealize, who envision a different world and envision a kind of escape from the given physical material world that appears very daunting and that doesn't appeal to them. So romantic poets tried to talk about, you know, fancy and imagination, and they tried to talk also about supernatural worlds. For instance, called Coleridge builds this kind of another level of supernatural reality, and they also tried to become one with nature, as you can see in the case of Wordsworth. So what I'm also trying to say is that romanticism played a very important role in shaping the influence and shaping the sensibility of Emily Bronte, and you can see her engagement with natural objects, natural elements, imagination that is taking the strain of the supernatural. You can see these elements in Emily Bronte as coming from the romantic movement, which was already prevalent in Europe at the time. So this is the point that I wanted to make about the natural world and the influence of imperialism. Does it mean this novel then is a romantic novel, or is it a realistic novel? Right? Now these are the questions that you will often find yourselves in, because Emily Bronte very clearly belongs to European realist tradition, right? She is writing around the same time when Dickens will begin writing, and so she's in fact you know, paving the way for that kind of realistic work that is going to be written in the coming decades. Now when we look at Emily Bronte, we find that the details and the kind of world that she creates is a very realistic world. It is not the world, for instance, of you know, monsters and other creations. It's a very realistic world where things are told very realistically. Even when there is a element of romance in it, things are very realistically depicted. Houses are detailed, given you know, presented with detailed descriptions. So what I'm really trying to suggest here is also that Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights sees an amalgam of both romanticism and realism. What does one mean by that? What one really means by that is that There is a kind of a romantic angle, there is a sense of romance, of a kind of play with supernatural elements. There will be a ghost in the text, there are these voices that you can hear, there is this eerie quality about the text, and there is poetry in the text. In fact, some people have gone on to call this novel pure poetry because of the range of emotion that it deals with, right. But on the other hand, it is very realistically situated in the here and now of the time. It is realistically situated in the time period and society that Emily Bronte found herself in. It has very real descriptions of the place, of the moorland. In fact, there have been in our own time, with the obsession of Emily Bronte and all the realist novelists, we find that there are now tours available. If you would like to see the kind of descriptions that Emily Bronte gave, you could go on a trip for the Bronte sisters, for instance, because these are real places that the Yorkshire, particularly moorland, is what she describes, and this is the place that you can actually go and visit today. So there are realistic descriptions of places and also realistic characters, right. Now, when we look at this text as a realistic text, of course, I have discussed the romantic angle there, but if we look at this text as a realistic text, you will find that realism through character emerges because of the complexity of characters. For instance, characters are not flat characters in the novel, they grow. If we take the case of Heathcliff, when Nellie tells us as a young boy he was rather simple and obedient and to the Earnshaw. It is only when Mr. Earnshaw dies and the young master takes over that Nellie tells us that the kind of behavior he showed towards Heathcliff, it could turn a saint into a fiend. So which means there is the changing a saint into a fiend, into a devil, is the work of man, is the work of Hindley, is the work of the master of the house, in the sense that Heathcliff, who came in as a savage boy, learnt emotions, learnt compassion in the company of the senior Earnshaw and Catherine, but when he was treated as an animal, he was made to be a stable boy in the house. It is then that he turns more and more cruel. So in a way, there is growth in characters, and realistic characters particularly work around this model of growth, of round characters. There is a lot hidden in their characters. Now, more or less throughout the text, you find Heathcliff to be cruel, and you find him to be bestial, in fact almost animalistic. But when he is with Catherine, he is very gentle, and his gentle side is seen by Nellie Dean. So in a way, characters are complex in a realistic situation. They are also typical in their realistic situations, which by typical, what does one mean? What is meant by typical is the idea that characters represent a particular group, a social group or a social class. So you could say that Catherine is a typical example of a rich lady in the making. You could say that Heathcliff is a typical example of a poor orphan who has been deprived of the rights that he could get. Edgar Linton is a typically elitist, rich person. So in a way, the typicality comes from the fact that characters who come from a particular background behave in a particular way. And every other character who would come from that background, given their uniqueness, they would have some unique qualities, but they will more or less behave in a similar way. So there is a sense of typicality attached to these characters, there is a sense of growth attached to them, and a sense of complexity, that they cannot be judged as right and wrong, they are not entirely bad or good, that there are different shades of these things in these characters, and in situations and with different people they also behave differently. So this is what gives this novel a kind of a realistic angle, right? Realistic setting and realistic characters faced with real social problems of life. For instance, what is the problem that Heathcliff faces in his life? That he was never accepted. He was accepted by Mr. Earnshaw, but not very much by others. The others looked down upon him as an orphan, and they thought that he did not even have the noble blood, right? And what made him, why should he be respected? It is only when he comes back and he wants to take revenge on society, on all those cultured people. And this brings us back to the discussion of nature and culture, that all those cultured people he wants to take revenge on. And it is he does so violently, right? Heathcliff is ferocious. He's in fact not at, and this is where the realistic angle changes to romantic also in that sense, because Heathcliff is at once this character who is savage and beast-like and animalistic, but he's also sometimes visualized as a ferocious natural force. For instance, Isabella in the text, is so put off with him, and she really doesn't understand his character, and she says, is Mr. Heathcliff really a man? If so, is he mad? And if not mad, is he a devil? So you see, these questions that are that are raised in this book, they actually tell us that how romanticism, a kind of a supernatural force, gets attached to a realistic setting. Now again, this kind of marriage between Heathcliff and Isabella is again this kind of a ill-begotten, so to speak, marriage between nature and culture. Heathcliff is all savage and natural and spontaneous and all of that. Isabella is the product of pure culture. She has a good breeding. She's been brought up among the Lintons, Edgar Linton, and in that with Edgar Linton as her brother. So she is this kind of an elegant elite lady who marries this savage Heathcliff, because of course now when he has money he can claim her and he wins favor. So but what is this marriage? Of course it's a kind of a failure. So in a way, Emily Bronte is also trying to suggest that nature and culture, when they come together, right, they are bound to fail. As in the case of Edgar Linton and Catherine. Catherine misunderstands herself. She is more nature than culture. She went with culture only to realize that she was more natural and more earthy and more savage, like Heathcliff. So, and it results in failed marriages on both counts, whether it is Catherine and Edgar, or for that matter it is Heathcliff and Isabella. Heathcliff's, of course, is a kind of a design on Isabella. He doesn't really want to marry Isabella, but he's taking a revenge on all the cultured people. So Heathcliff actually resolves to take revenge on the cultural world with his natural self. And this revenge that he takes, it is a revenge of nature upon culture. It is enacted through the deeds by subverting legitimacy of these characters. He forces Cathy, the young Cathy, to marry Linton, and forces Cathy to live in Wuthering Heights. What is that suggestive of? That he is forcing the product of that cultured world, the daughter of Edgar Linton and Catherine, who was in Thrushcross Grange. He forces her to come and live with Wuthering Heights, asserting the claim of nature or the revenge of nature on culture. Now this is when I want you to also look at the two houses in the text, which are like these tall figures. I mean, the whole action really revolves around these two houses, right? These two country houses that you see, they are an extension of the countryside, but they are also an extension of the characters who play a part in this. You find that houses actually become symbols of nature and culture in this text. You find that there is on one hand the countrified house, which is Wuthering Heights, which is long established by the Earnshaw family, and then there is Thrushcross Grange, which is the elegant country house of the Linton family. And so there is always a kind of a distinction made between these two houses, right? After Catherine's death, Catherine and Hareton Earnshaw, they finally plan to marry and live in the Grange. What is that a suggestion of? That Wuthering Heights finally, after Heathcliff's death, goes in the care of Joseph. It's a declining house. So once Heathcliff is dead, that revenge is, so to speak, complete, and both Hareton and Catherine, they decide to move to the Grange, that is Thrushcross Grange. So can we say culture has finally taken over nature in the text? Right. So there is this kind of a quality about this text where you find that characters become extensions of the place, the houses become extensions of characters, and they all live in a kind of a organic unity. But don't forget the debate between realism and romanticism in the text. You find that there is a kind of a metaphysical quality about this text, and that is given, this metaphysical quality comes through passion, and on the one hand there are these realistic settings, real problems of class and gender which are also projected in the text, and how that conflict. So, initially what may look like a conflict between romanticism and realism gets in a way synthesized, they in a way coexist, while in a realistic setting you find towards the end that Hareton and Cathy are going to get married and they are in love and they are going to live in Thrushcross Grange. On the other hand, the romantic supernatural element will tell you that there is already another union of the elder Catherine and Heathcliff that is taking place in the spiritual world of the nature or the natural, in the wilderness. So, in a way poetry, you find that in the text poetry merges with fantasy, feeling merges with sentiment, and humor merges with a sense of irony in the text. So, viewers, we will close our today's discussion with this, and I will meet you for another session on Wuthering Heights very soon. Thank you.